pirate's life for you. Hear ye, all who have ears, draw near and render attention. On behalf of the county seat of Appling, the municipality of Baxley, and as an official messenger of the nation of pirates, I hereby declare, in this classroom and its occupants are hereby impressed into the service of Appling County Pirates, its school district, and its athletic contests. Where are my athletes at? Football, softball, a little small, but we all need some bench warmers. Yeah, okay, you'll do. The occupants therein hereby relinquish any loyalty or fealty to the county of Bacon and the Raiders of Red. Red Raider, shirt, take it off. Your sweatshirt, take it off. Your hat, you're done, take it off. I don't want to see any B. I don't want to see any C. I don't want to see any Raiders. All that attire, take it off. Not allowed in this classroom anymore. Terms of impressment shall include service on behalf of Appling County, including but not limited to academics, athletics, labor, and service. Forfeiture of Bacon County or Red Raiders logos or garments of all types. If you're still wearing something, you better get it off. Donning of Appling County logos and garments of miscellaneous types. A public pledge of cheer and loyalty to the Appling County Pirates via a video message. And disciplined service to Appling County for the remainder of one's natural life. In summary, you're Appling County Pirates now, and you're gonna like it too. Okay, and scene. Let me get this trash off. Can't do it. All right. To be clear, Mr. Swanson, room 1206, Bacon County High School, Alma, Georgia. Get that trash off my screen. All right. What was going on there? I want to make it clear that was just a simulation, and now I'm not in the room today, but can you imagine if I had busted into the room and made you an Appling County Pirate? You probably would have had some feelings about me telling you you're no longer a Raider of Red. Your service is now on behalf of the municipality of Baxley, and you've been snatched out of your home and what you know and understand, and you are now serving another team. So just a couple of reflection questions for you. I know this is on video and not in person, but a couple of reflection questions for you. How would that make you feel? How do you feel right now? How did it feel to lose your home? Even your colors. I forced you to lose your colors. Did your loyalty change because of the announcement? That's a good question, especially for your athletes. Did you all of a sudden become loyal to the Appling County Pirates just because I told you had to be? Probably not. If we were to have changed shirts, like if I actually gave you an Appling County shirt and made you wear that, would that have changed anything? Or do you still bleed? Raider Red. Do you think so? Now let me make this point. The relation, and just a few minutes of humor here, is to set up one of the main causes of the War of 1812, which is impressment. And impressment, as depicted in the picture here, refers to British ships taking over American ships and forcing the sailors into the service of the British Navy. As if you woke up an American and then your ship got captured in the middle of the day and you go to bed as a British Navy sailor. Do you think that your loyalty changed just because they told you it had to? They took off your blue attire, American uniform, and gave you a red coat. Are you all of a sudden proud to be British? Probably not. Do you think that if I put you on an Appling County softball team today and told you that your service matters to them and them alone, you going to do a good job? Or you going to, swing at that high and outside, pitch just to make sure they get a strike? Do you think that do you think that these sailors were good workers just because the British captured them and put them into service in the crown? Here's a question for you. Were you ready to fight me, even through the screen? Were you angry enough to maybe fight me? When I do this simulation in the room, very often have some students like downright angry, me telling them they're no longer Red Raiders, they are pirates, and they are ready to fight me. Can you see then how the American people were ready to fight the British over impressment? That might be a long way around to make a point, but I hope that you'll remember this few minutes of a video opener and small simulation, and remember that impressment was one of the main causes of the War of 1812. So starting, hopefully I got your attention. Maybe I can keep your attention. Mr. Swanson here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever or whenever you are. I'm glad you're watching this video lecture. If I'm not in the room, this serves as your lecture for the day. If you've just stumbled upon this video, well, hang out with us for a few minutes, and I hope to teach you something about the presidency of James Madison and the War of 1812. So we just talked about impressment, being captured and forced into the service of a rival. The example, very specific example, that American sailors were being impressed into the service of the British Navy. And, just a little bit of perspective. Most of these sailors would have been in their 30s, okay, 20s and 30s. They were born in the 1760s or 70s. They were born into the British colonies at the time, right? Pre-revolution, they were born into the British colonies. So the British perspective was that they owed their service to the crown, right? They weren't Americans. They owed their service to the crown because they were born British. And furthermore, kind of from a practical perspective, Great Britain is at war with France, and just bottom line is in need of sailors. So snatching Americans off the high seas, impressing them into service, was a way to increase the size of their navy. Now think about how you felt. You, against your will, you were forced to comply. And even if just for a few minutes listening to the video, I told you you were an Appling County Pirates and you were forced to comply. Athletes playing for a different team. Think about sailors fighting for a different navy or serving a different country. Would they follow the orders they were told to follow? Would they behave and comply? Maybe just to stay alive. Most likely they would, just to stay alive. Now the athletics example maybe doesn't follow that so much because it's not like your life is on the line. But these sailors would behave and comply in order to stay alive. And very similar to how you maybe felt angry and frustrated, and very similar to how these sailors and their families and American politicians would have felt. You can't do this to me. I'm not a Appling County pirate, or I'm not a British citizen. I'm an American, and I'm gonna fight for that right. So the sailors themselves maybe didn't have much opportunity to resist as they were forced into service, but their families back home are angry, and American politicians are being compelled to stand up for them. And this is gonna set the stage for the War of 1812. This greatly upsets Americans and is a contributing factor to the declaration of the War of 1812. So chip through the slides here a little bit. Britain was seizing American ships and cargo that were landing in France. So this is a violation of neutral rights on top of the fact that the sailors were being impressed into service. Talk about this briefly with Thomas Jefferson. The Embargo Act of 1807 attempted to solve the problem by just stopping trade with both countries. Fits a little bit into George Washington's sentiment of avoid foreign entanglements. Thomas Jefferson says we're going to avoid foreign entanglements by not doing trade with either country, Britain or France. But this harms American business and is widely unpopular. So, not super helpful in terms of staving off a war. Other issues at the time is actually on the frontier. Indians on the frontier are more aligned with the British than the Americans. And in fact, they are often compelled by the British to attack American frontier outposts. Tecumseh, one of the leading Shawnee Indian chiefs, he attacked several frontier settlements. Americans would believe that the British were offering benefits to the Indians in order to attack their frontier settlements and fight back. One famous fight is with William Henry Harrison. He's the territorial governor of Indiana. So Indiana is not a state just yet, territorial governor. And William Henry Harrison leads troops against Shawnee at what is known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. And this defeat forces the Indians to, kind of they're defeated and they have to regroup. And this is a positive thing for the Americans and for William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison is a future president whom we will not talk about very much, but of note, he gets his start in the military, as a lot of the presidents do, and he becomes president. He's actually the shortest serving president. He dies in office after just over a month. I think it's like 34 days. So impressment, cause number one of setting the stage for the War of 1812. Indian attacks on the frontier, cause number two, setting the stage for the War of 1812. And the fact that the British still have not left forts in the frontier in the Ohio River Valley is another setting the stage for the War of 1812. This is something we've addressed twice now. The British were supposed to leave with the Treaty of Paris of 1783. When we won the war, we gained land all the way to the Mississippi River, and the British were supposed to leave. They didn't, so First President George Washington sends negotiators to Britain to try to solve several problems, one of which was their presence in the Ohio River Valley. And this becomes Jay's Treaty. Jay's Treaty seen as weak. Washington does accept it. And the one term that was agreed to was that the British would leave the forts in the West. And they still haven't. So at this point, it's a matter of national pride. Hey, listen, beat you once, negotiated with you. Why are you still out front? And of course, this is related to us also wanting to expand. We purchased the Louisiana Territory. This is our land. It's time to get them out of there. Our land, our continent, a little bit of a precursor to manifest destiny. We have the right to go to expand all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. So this is a problem. The stage has been set for another war. I hope you see that. So as with every military conflict, you got people for it and against it. Let's look at who is for it. Supporters for the war are called war hawks. They are mostly Democratic Republicans from the West and from the South. They want to stand up for ourselves. They want to beat the British again. They're in favor of the American pride and national sense of nationalism. Leading figures, Henry Clay, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, significant leader. John C. Calhoun, a senator from South Carolina. So war hawks. This is a phrase for you to know. If you are hawkish, means you are for whatever the topic is. So war hawks are for war, supporters for the war. Let's look at opponents for the war. Almost right along political lines here. Opponents to the war are Federalists. Federalists mostly in the North, who are businessmen and bankers who are relying on trade with the British. So it makes sense that they are against the war because they don't want to lose their trade partner and the money that comes with that. We say it all the time, follow the money, you'll find the story. And that is true right here as well. Impact on their opposition to the war is that it makes them look unpatriotic, and especially their opponents paint them as such. Oh, they're against the war because they love the British. They must be unpatriotic. They are against American ideals. And as this position, them taking this stance is eventually going to be the undoing of the Federalist Party. It's going to put them in the grave, really, because as America wins the war, just jump to the finish line there, the Federalists found themselves on the wrong side, being opponents to the war, and this is going to be the undoing or the end of the Federalist Party. The most important supporter for the war is President James Madison. A little bit about President James Madison. So he's our fourth president. He was Jefferson's Secretary of State, and we talked a lot about how the Secretary of State position was almost seen as the next, being next in line for the presidency. And he is a Democratic Republican in an era where they're the more popular political party. So he wins 12 out of 17 states and the electoral votes that go with him, and he becomes the fourth president. James Madison, there's no better way to say it than he was a nerd. Okay? James Madison was a nerd. He was not a George Washington, a man of stature and poise. If you put on a military outfit with a saber, that wasn't him, right? He wasn't looking dashing or regal or physically imposing, nothing like that. So he was a nerd. No other way to describe it. Physically shorter, smaller. He was a hypochondriac. Like everything made him ill and anxious. His nickname was Little Old Applejack because even as a youth, as a young man, he always looked old. So he was of the founding fathers generation. He is the father of the Constitution. He's the author of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So that's super important for us to know. He's one of those key writers. He has certainly paid his dues and in creating the early government. And in some ways, it's his turn to be president, especially coming off of the Secretary of State position. He brings with him his wife. His wife, Dolly, is perhaps more popular than he was, and she's going to be a very formative first lady. We'll talk about her a little bit more in a second. So James Madison is an important supporter of the war, and he asks Congress for a declaration of war. That is a big ask from a juvenile country. I mean, think about it. We're about 30 years old as a country. The British as a country is an empire. They are centuries old. They have the largest army, land army, and navy in the world, and we are declaring war on them. Pretty bold, pretty brash, and it just goes to show what we felt about ourselves. We are a sovereign nation. We have independence, and you can't keep bullying us around. So President Madison asks Congress for a declaration of war. It's actually a very narrow vote, but Congress does vote to go to war. And this happens in June of 1812, thus the very creatively named War of 1812. It lasts longer than just 1812. I don't know about you. When I was growing up, I thought it was the war that happened in the year 1812. The war is declared in 1812. The war will continue onward for 2.5 years, all the way into 1815. So just understanding of why is it called the War of 1812, because it was declared in 1812. So about the war itself, we're not going to talk about too many of the battles. This is not a military history class. A good political cartoon here shows that we want to give the British another black eye. We want to bloody their nose, right? Beat them once, we want to beat them twice. And early on, early on, we are unsuccessful. Early on, the British have more victories than we do. We actually turn our attention to Canada. We attack north. Canada is a British colony at the time. So and they have many soldiers and outposts in Canada, which is right along our northern border. So we actually attack into Canada and have our first successes at the Battle of York. A key victory for the U.S. in the Battle of York. This is present-day Toronto, Canada. So just north of the New York border into Toronto. And the U.S. troops land on the shore. About 1,700 of them go forward into the city, capture the city, burn and loot the fort and town for about 3 days. And this is the capital city of Canada. So it's, as a colony, anytime you capture the capital or, raid and loot the capital, it's kind of significant. I'll let you read the historic marker here. You can do that on your own time. So kind of a first big victory for us in York. Yay for us. Maybe we can do this after all. Bum, bum, bum. Cliffhanger. Let's see what comes next. Well, what comes next is the burning of Washington, D.C. So Battle of York, thumbs up. Burning of Washington, D.C. is going to be a thumbs down for us. And this is a painting, of course, no photography yet at this time, a painting, but you can see the depiction of the White House on fire. Actually, wrong phrase there. It wasn't called the White House. It was called the Presidential Mansion. After it was burned, it would be rebuilt, painted white, and then nicknamed by President Theodore Roosevelt the White House. So the common vernacular we use today hasn't always been called the White House, but it's from the burning to the ground, the rebuilding of it, and painting it white. It does eventually get nicknamed the White House for that reason. So the burning of the presidential mansion, really the burning of Washington, D.C., what happens is that the British march on Washington. They march on our capital city. They invade the White House. They invade the United States Capitol. I've visited the United States Capitol several times in my growing up years, and if you take a tour of the Capitol, and that's a popular thing to do if you visit Washington, D.C., a lot of congressmen have interns in their office who are trained to give tours of the building. There are several spots in our Capitol where you can see bullet holes and burn marks from the British invading our Capitol in 1814. Literally still there. The building is still standing, of course, but British soldiers entered the Capitol, caused damage, and some of those marks are literally still there on the marble of the United States Capitol. So history is very alive. It's not just something that's stuck in the past. You can go and see these burn marks in the Capitol today. So the presidential mansion is on fire. The city is on fire. James Madison was actually out of the city at this time. He was in Maryland. Now, he didn't tuck tail and run. He was visiting troops in Maryland. He's not present, but who is present is his wife. His wife is in the city, and let's see what she does at this time. So the burning of Washington, D.C., the British captured D.C. in August of 1914. They set fire to the presidential mansion and Capitol. Madison had escaped to Virginia, Maryland, like I said, and his wife, Dolly, who is present in the White House, saves the day, really saves many historic valuables, documents, papers, and most notably, a life-size painting of George Washington and also of Martha Washington. So the story of Dolly Madison, I told you she was a formative first lady. She was the phrase we might use today is boss babe, right? I mean, she was just a boss lady who ran the White House. More than just this moment of August of 1814 when she rescues things in the White House, she was one who was hosting dinner parties at the White House. She would have she would host ladies groups where they would meet and talk in the parlor. And she was more than just the president's wife. She was the first lady. And catch me when I say that. She wasn't just the woman attached to the president. She made it her own position. She made the position of the first lady. So very formative first lady. On this night, what she does is, as the British are approaching the city, okay, they're not in the White House, but everybody realizes what is about to happen. And Dolly Madison starts directing the staff, the help, take that, save that, not important, box these papers up. And in particular, she points to the first painting of George Washington. Okay, this is the official presidential portrait of George Washington. It's life-sized. George Washington was 6 feet 2 inches tall, so the painting is life-sized. And what she does is she takes it out of the frame and she rolls it up, right? Rolls the canvas up. So now it's just a long tube of canvas, and she gets it out of the White House. She does this for George's picture, Martha's picture, George's wife, her husband's picture, and her picture. So she saves 4 portraits on this night. She does not save the second or third presidents, but she does save this life-size portrait of George Washington. And you've seen this picture before. Our opener slide, it says, "Welcome to U.S. history," and it's got George Washington like moving his arm up and down. It's this picture right here. This is the portrait of George Washington that Dolly Madison saved. And quite frankly, we would not see this picture today if she had not saved it. So very important decision she made. And she was history-minded, right? She was thinking forward. What artifacts do we need to save to tell the story of our country? And she decided that the portrait of George Washington was super important. I have hyperlinked an article about Dolly Madison saving artifacts in the White House, and you can read that at the conclusion of this video audio guide. All right, moving right along to the Battle of Fort McHenry. So Fort McHenry is the fort that protects Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is a port city. The fort is situated right on the edge of the harbor, and the way military defense worked in the time frame is that the fort could protect the whole harbor. If the fort falls, the opposing army or the invaders can come on in, but if the fort holds, they would be able to attack the ships from a distance. That's how warfare worked at the time. So Fort McHenry was the key to the city of Baltimore. And the city of Baltimore was the key to the middle colonies, middle states area. Baltimore was key. Fort McHenry was key. So this is a very important moment in the War of 1812, and quite frankly, a very important moment in the history of the United States, because the fall of Fort McHenry could have been the fall of America. Let's see what happens. British are advancing towards Baltimore. They bombard Fort McHenry in September of 1814. A Marylander lawyer named Francis Scott Key witnesses the battle and the attack from afar. And he does something that's going to codify, that's going to seal Fort McHenry into our national history forever. He writes a poem. His poem is called The Defense of Fort McHenry, and it gets repackaged as what you would know today as the Star-Spangled Banner. So let me tell you that story. This is Fort McHenry. This is the interior of the fort, so you can see that inside the fort, and Just outside of it would have been the whole harbor. And I think I got another picture coming up that shows that a little bit better. Here's the story of Francis Scott Key. Francis Scott Key is a lawyer. He goes to a British warship, and it's actually a prisoner ship. So he's in the harbor. Now he goes there under a flag of truce. He is not a prisoner, but he's trying to negotiate the release of one of his friends who has been taken prisoner. He's on the warship on the night that the bombardment starts. Now, again, he's not captive. He's not in chains or shackles or anything like that, but they're also not going to let him go back to the mainland. They keep him on the ship during the bombardment. The bombardment lasted September 13th, 1814 for about 36 hours. And Francis Scott Key is on this British ship of war during the bombardment. And as it gets dark, of course, there's no electricity and there's no night vision goggles, modern military things. As it gets dark, the only way he knows how the battle is going is when every bomb burst lights up the horizon line and he can see that the flag still waves. So in the midst of his difficult night, right, he's wondering how this is going to shake out. Is there still an America? If Fort McHenry falls and Baltimore falls, America might fall. So he takes his pen to paper and he authors a 4-stanza poem called The Defense of Fort McHenry. And you know this today as the Star Spangled Banner. The poem gets set to music, set to a particular tune, rephrased or retitled as the Star Spangled Banner, and eventually adopted as our national anthem. We sing as our national anthem the first stanza. There are 3 more stanzas, 4 stanzas in total. But you've heard these words a lot, right? Let me try to break this down for you a little bit and show you what Francis Scott Key was thinking at the time. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? He's saying, is the flag still there? As the morning awakens by the dawn's early light, is the flag still there? What so proudly we hailed the last time the sun went down, the flag was still there, the twilight's last gleaming, broad stripes, bright stars, perilous fight. On the ramparts we watched. That means the flagpole. We watched the flagpole all night long, trying to see the flag by the rocket's red glare with the bombs bursting in air. Every time we could see it, it gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. I get chill bumps just talking about this. The last line here, notice this, is a question. It ends with a question mark. And I know when we sing the song, we usually finish with like a emphatic punctuation, exclamation point. But he's saying, oh, say, does that star-spangled banner still wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? Question mark. This first paragraph is his thoughts through the night. Is the flag still there? Does the fort still hold? Does America still live? Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner still wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? This is what we sing as our national anthem. And next time you sing it, know that you're finishing with a question mark. Now, the next 3 stanzas, less popular. I'll give you like 2 seconds of current events here. You know that there over the past couple of years, especially in the sports world, there was the movement of taking a knee or turning your back or sitting down to the national anthem. And here's why. And some people maybe don't even know why they did that. There's a representation of police brutality or race relations in the country. But here's the why. In the 3rd stanza, it does reference the hireling and the slave. So Francis Scott Key writes in a time period where slavery is still active, and he writes about the hireling and the slave. So some will say that the Star Spangled Banner, the national anthem, is a racist song for the mention of slavery. And I'll hear that. I'll hear both sides of the conversation. We don't sing or recite the 3rd stanza, so most people don't know that statement. We sing and recite the 1st stanza, which is our national anthem. So as always, I encourage you to do more research on your own, know the whole story all the time, and I'm just giving you a couple of facts there. This next picture right here, this is the Star Spangled Banner. This is the flag that Francis Scott Key, this is a picture of him, was watching on that night. After the Battle of Fort McHenry, the banner itself, the Star Spangled Banner itself, went on a nationwide tour. It was a relic. It was something that people would come and see. This is the flag that still stood over Fort McHenry. And interesting to note, look at it and look at the right-hand side of it, and what do you notice? what you notice is that one, it's not a long flag, right? It's almost been clipped down. And two, this right-hand edge is very uneven. But what happened, this would never happen today. But what would happen in the time period is that as people got close to it, they'd actually snip off a little bit as a souvenir. Oh, look, I got a little bit of the flag that was at Fort McHenry. So eventually they put a stop to this, right? As the flag continued to tour the country, they put a stop to that and they had to preserve they preserved this much of the flag. You'll notice even that one of the whole stars is cut out. One of these whole stars got cut out. That was actually cut out by the wife of the commander of Fort McHenry. She said, we deserve this star in our family. So they cut that whole star out. This flag today is at the Smithsonian Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. It is very fragile. It's old, right? It's cloth, it's fabric, it's very brittle. It is displayed under a very protective blue light, like a low lighting scenario. And the light that actually shines on it is, I don't know all the science, but it's, blue and non-ultraviolet or I don't know, something, right? It's a very protective museum exhibit. And I remember the last time I got to see it, I was in Washington, D.C., and I just zipped through the museum real quick because I just wanted to see a couple of things of American history. And I actually walked in the room by myself. Like, how often does that happen? Think about how busy these museums are, but I walked into the room by myself, and I just had a moment with the Star Spangled Banner. I was the only one in the room looking at Francis Scott Key's Fort McHenry's Star Spangled Banner. It's just like, whoo, get chill bumps just thinking about it. It's a very beautiful thing to see. So should you ever find yourself in Washington, D.C., all of the Smithsonian museums are free, and you should find your way into them and see all these things that we've been talking about, to include the Star Spangled Banner. All right, enough about that. Moving on to, and I've hyperlinked a couple things related to all of these topics. Let's end the war. The war ends at with the Treaty of Ghent, not Paris this time, right? This is the Treaty of Ghent. Ghent is in Belgium, present-day Belgium. So this treaty was negotiated in Belgium. After all the battles across North America, okay, into Canada, and some involving the Indians, etc., a treaty is negotiated in December of 1814. The war is basically at a stalemate. Okay, neither side is gained or lost. I mean, we lost some lives, but in terms of territory, neither side has really gained or lost, and both sides just won out. Right? Let's just end this. From the American perspective, especially from that war hawk perspective, yeah, let's end it by getting the British off my continent finally. And meanwhile, the Federalists are still trying to say that they've been anti-war the whole time, and see, we haven't even won the war. So there's still the politics going on here. The war ends in a stalemate, neither side gaining or losing much territory. And the war is technically concluded on December 24th, 1814. Problem is, it's in Belgium. Think about the time period, think about travel, think about communication. The war ends in Belgium on December 25th. What don't people in North America know? They don't know that the war is over yet. So let me cue you up. January of 1815 and the Battle of New Orleans. These belligerents, both sides, Americans and the British, didn't know the war was over. So the British, their last orders, okay, the British commander's last orders was to still try to take a port city, and he chooses the port city of New Orleans. New Orleans is defended by a ragtag group of Americans commanded by General Andrew Jackson, future President Andrew Jackson, but at the time it's General Andrew Jackson. And his group of soldiers is not exactly a professional fighting force. He's got farmers, he's got immigrants, he's got paroled prisoners, he's got vagabonds, he's got craftsmen, but he groups them together, and he's old. You know, his nickname is Old Hickory because he's just a tough dude. He makes them into a defense force, and the British try to invade New Orleans unsuccessfully. So the Battle of New Orleans, word of the treaty has not yet reached New Orleans. January 8th, 1815, General Andrew Jackson decisively defeats the invading British. The British tuck tail and run. The American casualties very low, British casualties very high, and this is seen as a decisive concluding victory for the Americans. The irony, of course, is that the battle didn't even have to be fought. Technically, the war was already over. This did not change anything about the Treaty of Ghent. It had already been negotiated, but what it was that final punctuation mark for for the Americans, right? Oh, there were over 2,000 British casualties, 71 American casualties, only 13 dead. So 13 dead and 55, 57 or so wounded. That's a very decisive victory, a major victory for Andrew Jackson and his ragtag army. And this makes Andrew Jackson into a national hero. He gains major name recognition, and it propels him into national fame. And in America, when you have name recognition, when you're famous, what can you do? Well, the answer is anything you want, usually, right? And in this case, it's going to propel him into politics. He's going to take his name recognition and eventually run for president based on that name. And this is not the first or the last time that the military would make a man famous and lead him to the presidency. We have several presidents who got their start in the military and then move into a life of politics. Andrew Jackson is just one of them. We're going to hang out with Andrew Jackson for 2 days coming up. So I'm going to save his biography for those days. He is definitely the man, the myth, the legend, and we're going to have fun talking about him over the next for 2 more days as well. Got a couple things hyperlinked about the Battle of New Orleans along the way as well. Effects of the war. So important. There's a surge of American nationalism, a sense of a new identity. We're big kids now, right? We stood up to the British again, beat them once, beat them twice. We are a 32-year-old country. And finally, we got the old empire off of our continent. So a surge in American nationalism. James Monroe becomes the next president. This is a picture of James Monroe. And the next chunk of American history is going to be called the era of good feelings, right? The wars are over. The complications that we've come through for the first 4 presidencies are over. And Monroe gets the privilege of leading through the so-called, quote marks, era of good feelings. The War of 1812 is the death of the Federalist Party. They fade to black because of their opposition of the war up to literally the conclusion. This wasn't a good look for them. And that final punctuation mark, the Battle of New Orleans, was probably their death toll because they opposed the war the whole time. And guess what? We won the war. Makes you look like you supported the wrong side. This is the death of the Federalist Party. So Democratic Republicans dominate for a while the Federalists fade away. Effects of the war on American industry. Up to this point, U.S. manufacturing had lagged far behind Europeans before the war. But when the war started, U.S. ships could no longer carry products overseas for trade, nor could we receive products from other nations. And I mean, one of our big trade partners was England, so we're at war with them. We're not trading with them anymore. So instead, the U.S. had to start to self-supply with the products that we needed. As a result, think about this. Have your parents ever made you struggle through something so you get better at it? They could have done whatever it is for you. I'll pick an example for you. We're at the age with my daughter where I'm making her carry her softball bag into the dugout. Before age 4 and 5, I was happy to put that backpack on my shoulder and bring it to the dugout and get her all set up and do it all for her. Now she's age 6 and she's on all-star softball and I'm making her carry her own backpack. Could I carry her backpack for her? Why, yes, I sure could. So why do I make her struggle with it on her own? So that she'll grow. So take that as the analogy. The war was the struggle that made us grow up as a country. As a result of the war, U.S. manufacturing and agriculture had to improve. We had to get better at creating our own stuff, growing our own crops, and producing our own goods through factories. So we did, we improved, and we grew prosperous. Northern manufacturers started selling to other regions of the country that we had not previously done business with before. Sounds crazy, right? But the North was actually not doing a lot of selling to the South. They did a lot of selling overseas, but not selling to their own country. This war changes that. They now have to do business with other regions of the country they previously had not done business with. And Southern plantation economy also exploded because they were the only supplier of cotton around, and the only buyers of cotton around were from within the country. So we started to self-sustain. By the end of the war, by the time the war ended, U.S. manufacturers and planters had established themselves as respectable players for both domestic and international trade. We can supply ourselves and we can trade overseas. So very significant growth because of the war. We grew up, right? We're the big kids now. Mommy, wow, I'm a big kid now. Other effects of the war, something that comes out of the war is Henry Clay's American system. Henry Clay, Speaker of the House, a name that we've talked about a lot, the great compromiser. He comes up with several compromises in his time. What is the American system? Well, it's three parts. Here's a picture of Henry Clay. American system is three parts. One, it's a tariff on goods coming into America. That's supposed to make American goods more desirable to buy. We recharter the national bank. It's going to be called the Second National Bank. And remember, we've already talked about this, seen as a tool for the wealthy, not really considering the agrarian man, and a variety of internal improvements. And just kind of give you some political speak, internal improvements are going to refer to things that connect the country. So infrastructure that connects the country, such as roads, canals, and railroads. What do those cost? Money. So the American system was seen as being something that was for the wealthy, to benefit the wealthy. Tariffs benefit the wealthy, harm American manufacturers. The National Bank was a tool of the wealthy, and this variety of internal improvements was going to be something that cost a lot and was also for the wealthy, right? To help the rich get richer. Criticisms of the American system, everything I just said, the belief was that it was designed to further enrich the wealthy, the rich get richer, and you're probably not surprised that an outspoken opponent of this is former president, Democratic Republican, defender of the common man, defender of the agricultural man, Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson opposes the American system. Now, I want to make sure we understand that good things came out of the American system as well. It was designed to unite the country through roads and canals. The Erie Canal and Lake Erie is a big one that connected the ability to transport goods from the New England states to the rest of the country. Canals are very important to transporting goods before railroads. Railroads are also included in the American system as well. These tariffs were designed, they were a tariff on foreign goods, which were designed to make people want to buy American goods. The problem is that other countries retaliate with their own tariffs and actually make it harder to sell American goods abroad. So, like Southern cotton growers, you may want to buy American, but it also makes it harder for them to sell American overseas. So there's just kind of both sides of the American system there. Final effects of the war: the U.S. increases its stature around the world. We have grown up. We are now an international power. The Monroe Doctrine, something we'll talk more about tomorrow, shows that the U.S. believes in itself, right? We assert ourselves and our leadership throughout the whole Western Hemisphere. And I'm just going to hang on to that one for tomorrow. We're going to elaborate on the Monroe Doctrine tomorrow. And reasonably, you can even say that the acquisition of Florida was brought about by the effects of the War of 1812. So our country is being puzzle pieced together. We have now added, you can say we've added Florida. We'll talk about all of that inside of Manifest Destiny, creating what is the continental United States from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We like to say from sea to shining sea. So the whole story is coming together. And the War of 1812, while not the most popular of American wars, has a pretty significant impact on the growth of the country and, quite frankly, the country that you live in today. Little check on learning. You can read the Star Spangled Banner and reflect through these questions. Now, I'm going to wrap it up here with this audio guide, because here's what you're going to do now. You're going to dive into the War of 1812 web quest. These notes are already in your study guide or already in your work packet. And what you're going to do, you're going to click the hyperlink that says talk to 8 people, and you're going to see these 8 people. This used to be a website from the National Park Service, and you could click on each person yourself, right? It would take you to talk to Francis Scott Key. It would take you to talk to Henry Clay. One of the characters is George Roberts. Has anybody ever been coached by George Roberts in town, or his son, George Roberts, right? Students always get a kick out of talking to George Roberts. Well, let me tell you, just today, I tried to get onto this website, and the website has been changed or shut down. I did a little research. I think it's because the JavaScript you can tell this is a little bit older. It's not exactly 4K HD graphics. So this website was really cool in 2010, but it's a little bit older for today. And believe it or not, the National Park Service doesn't even host this page anymore, which makes me really sad because it's a great activity. Never fear, somebody has this thing on YouTube. So all you got to do is click the link, and the YouTube video will take you through each person. The only thing you're not going to do is click on it yourself. So follow the page. You're going to listen to 8 perspectives. 4 of them are for the war, 4 of them are opposed to the war. Write down who is for the war and why. Not just their name, but also their why. Who is against the war and why. Some of them are war hawks. Some of them are federalists. Some of them are for the war. Some of them are against the war and why. So good little activity there to understand America in 1812. And then on the back side of your web quest, there's an article for you to click. It's going to give you the history of Uncle Sam. You are probably familiar with Uncle Sam, but this article is going to give you the true history of Uncle Sam. And with that, I will say that the story of us remains to be continued. Slide by Selah. Bye-bye.